They laughed so loud the jukebox almost gave up, its old speakers coughing static between the roars of drunken amusement. The kind of laughter that wasn't about joy, it was about dominance, about cutting the air in half so no one else in the room could breathe without their permission. The bar smelled of spilled beer, fried onions left too long under the heat lamp, and the sour tang of leather soaked in sweat. It was late, but not late enough for the crowd to thin out. Friday nights in a small Texas town didn't end until people were too drunk to remember who they were insulting. And right there in the middle of it, sitting alone at a scarred wooden table under the neon glow of a Lone Star sign, was Chuck Norris. No entourage, no bodyguard, no one holding his chair for him. Just a plain glass of water sweating onto the wood, his hands folded calmly in front of him, the creases around his eyes as still as the desert at night. He looked like he'd been there for hours, the kind of man who didn't mind blending in with strangers, though blending was impossible. Every set of eyes that wandered eventually landed on him, stayed too long, and darted away again. The bikers noticed it too. They were 6, maybe 7 men. Heavy boots tracking dirt across the sticky floor, their leather vests patched with skulls and flames. They smelled of gasoline and wet asphalt, the kind of smell that stayed on your skin for days. They had been holding court at the bar all night, drinking fast and loud, pushing each other for sport. But once they realized who was sitting there in the corner, their energy shifted, sharpened, like dogs catching a new scent. At first, it was whispers. "That's him, isn't it?" Followed by nudges, chuckles, and then the first open laugh. By the time the third round of beer arrived, the laughter had become a weapon. "Look at him!" one of them barked, raising his voice so it carried. Texas's own screen cowboy, hiding behind his glass of water. The others followed, piling on, louder and meaner with each line. "Old man still waiting for someone to call action before he makes a move." Another slammed his bottle down. "Hey, Chuck, you bring a stunt double with you, or just your arthritis tonight?" The bar's rhythm shifted. Conversations faltered, darts hung mid-throw, and the pool table clatter went quiet. People didn't want to stare, but they couldn't not. It felt sacrilegious, hearing someone spit on a name that, for many here, was stitched into childhood. Chuck Norris wasn't just a man. They'd grown up watching him save towns, outfight villains, and walk away without a scratch. He was supposed to be untouchable. But here, in the low light, surrounded by men who thrived on disrespect, he sat motionless. He didn't flinch. He didn't answer. He let their words circle him like gnats, his silence heavy enough to become its own presence. For some in the crowd, that silence was unnerving. For others, it was disappointing. They wanted him to prove he was the legend they remembered, not the quiet older man at the edge of the room. The bikers mistook it for weakness. One of them, a tall man with a thick beard matted from the heat, tipped his beer bottle and poured a thin stream onto the floor, inches from Chuck's boots. The amber liquid splattered dark across the wood, the smell sharp and sour. The man grinned, leaning back to admire his own audacity. The laughter exploded again, filling the space until the walls seemed too tight. It pressed against everyone's chest, daring someone, anyone, to interrupt it. But no one moved. Not the bartender polishing glasses with deliberate slowness, not the couple near the jukebox who pretended to be too wrapped up in each other to notice. All of them waited, eyes flicking between the bikers and the calm, still figure at the table. Chuck's gaze stayed low, on the ring of condensation his glass had left on the wood. His knuckles rested lightly against the surface, not tense, not clenched, just steady. The quiet way he held himself seemed to anger the bikers more than if he'd jumped up and swung a fist. They thrived on reaction, on fear or rage, but they were getting nothing. The bearded one leaned closer, the stink of hops and smoke rolling off him. "What's the matter, hero? You only fight bad guys with camera crews?" The crowd shifted in their seats. A few shook their heads, others smirked nervously. The tension wasn't just in the air anymore, it was in their throats, their stomachs, an invisible weight no one could shake off. Everyone knew something had to break, and yet Chuck didn't rise. He didn't scowl. He didn't even touch his glass. His stillness was louder than the biker's insults, but how long could stillness last when humiliation was dripping off every word? That was the question no one could shake. Would he let it stand? Or was the silence hiding something else entirely? Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down, bellow. The ember fell with a faint hiss, burning out against the wood before the biker's thumb smeared it flat. The smoke curled upward, thin and mean. For a second, nobody in the bar breathed. The jukebox clicked off mid-song. The sudden silence pressed on the room. The bartender froze mid-polish, towel in his hands, watching as if afraid to blink. A couple near the door leaned in, pretending they weren't staring. Every chair creaked a little closer toward the corner table. The biker grinned at his audience. On screen, you beat 20 guys with a single kick. Out here? He leaned lower, his voice spreading. Out here, you don't even look at me. Chuck finally raised his eyes. Calm, steady, not defiant, not soft, just present. People looked away too quickly when his gaze found them. Then he smiled, faint, as if to himself. It wasn't triumph, it wasn't fear. It unsettled more than it explained. A ripple of whispers spread. He doesn't owe them anything, someone murmured. He's just sitting there. Another voice, louder. He's washed up. The crowd was split in half. Strength or surrender? Nobody knew. Say something, the biker snapped. Ash tapped onto the table like punctuation. You boys finished? Chuck asked. The evenness of his tone unsettled the room more than anger would have. The man leaned closer, breath sour with beer. Almost. One more thing. He raised the cigarette, pointing like a weapon. When's the last time you bled for real? A dart clattered on the floor. Nobody moved to pick it up. Chuck didn't answer. He shifted, subtle, weight forward, shoulders loose, like a man quietly checking that his body was still his. Then he took a sip of water, set the glass precisely back into its ring. The perfection of that gesture felt like an insult. Another biker, smaller and drunker, slapped the table. Look at him! Mr. Zen. He sought laughs, got a few nervous ones. He slapped harder, trying to shake the calm. Not the furniture, the bartender warned, his voice thin. The crowd's laughter was brittle, guilt already built into it. The bearded one rolled his shoulders. Talking wasn't enough anymore. He stepped forward, boots sticky in spilled beer. Stand up. Chuck rose slowly. The scrape of the chair on tiles screeched across the silence. He didn't square up. He simply stood, steady, calm. The biker bumped him with a shoulder. Nothing. Again, harder, forcing him back an inch into the table. Glass rattled. A voice from the booths slipped out. Don't! The small biker jeered. Show us the spin kick, Chuck. Chuck glanced toward the bar mirror. He wasn't looking at the man in front of him. He was looking at everyone behind, their white knuckles on glasses, their feet half ready to bolt. You wanted a show, he said evenly. You should have stayed home with the television. The woman at the counter closed her eyes as if in prayer. The shove came then, full-bodied. Chuck staggered half a step, caught himself with 2 fingers on the table. He straightened, smoothed his shirt, and did nothing more. The silence that followed was heavier than a punch. A man at the door laughed too loud. Guess that proves it. Nobody laughed with him. The biker advanced again, certain of victory. Boots scraped sticky wood. He lowered his shoulder for another shove. And then the room changed. The silence thickened, more than soundless. It pressed into bone. Neon buzz faltered. A cool draft pushed under the door, sharp with the metallic smell of distant rain. Heads turned, not toward the fight, but toward the entrance. Instinct had tilted them. Chuck's eyes had already moved there. The hinge groaned. The door opened. spilling night into the bar. Someone whispered, "Oh, hell!" They didn't know who had arrived, only that everything inside had shifted. The door opened slow, letting the night spill in before the figure behind it. A tall man stepped through, broad shoulders under a dark coat, ponytail trailing down his back, his stride unhurried. The neon light didn't touch him. It bent away, leaving him in shadow. He walked like he expected space to clear. Recognition rolled across the bar in a wave. People whispered his name before daring to say it properly. Seagal. The sound carried uneasily, half awe, half disbelief. The bearded biker, still squared against Chuck, shifted. Surprise flickered, then irritation. His story had been hijacked. The short one grinned wide, thrilled by the coincidence. Chuck didn't move. He watched Seagal as if observing a change in weather. Steady, unblinking, accepting that the night had taken a different shape. The door sighed shut behind Seagal. He scanned the room, eyes resting on the beer pooled near a boot, on the glass ring on Chuck's table, on the faces crowding the edges. He said one word to the bartender, "Water." It came calm, weighty, settling the bar's rhythm like a stone dropped into a pond. He took the glass but didn't drink, just let his hand rest against the cool. His gaze landed on the biker's last. "You done?" he asked, tone casual, almost bored. The bearded man scoffed. "Almost?" He looked at Chuck as if searching for validation, but got nothing. Chuck chose that moment to move. He stepped aside, not retreating, not defensive, just shifting. The scrape of his boot was quiet, but it hit the crowd like a crack of thunder. People misread it as surrender. The short biker howled with laughter, clapping his thighs, and the bar followed, eager for release. It was cruel, and everyone knew it, but the sound spread anyway. The bearded man took the silence left behind as victory. He rapped a knuckle against the glass on the table. The delicate chime cut through the laughter and embarrassed it into dying out. Chuck's expression didn't flicker. His stillness now looked less like weakness and more like patience stretched to its edge. Seagal moved from the bar to stand near the table, not shielding Chuck, not confronting the biker, just adjusting the geometry of the room so nothing aligned the way it had before. His presence framed the choice hanging in the air. "You want him to fight you," Seagal said evenly. "You need it." "I want what I want," the biker answered, though his voice had lost a notch of certainty. "Looks to me," Seagal said, eyes flicking to the beer ring. "You want permission." The word rattled the crowd. Some lowered their heads, ashamed of how quickly they'd laughed. The short biker tried to bark back, but found no rhythm. The bearded man's smile flattened. Force he understood, permission he didn't. Chuck finally spoke, voice low, carrying anyway. "It's their night." He didn't explain who he meant. He just let the words land. He reached for his glass, then lowered his hand empty, leaving the circle of condensation untouched. The short biker pushed harder. "Then finish it, old man. Or let the new guy dance." The bearded one set his palms on the table, ready to shove it, to claim an ending. Chuck stepped aside again. Not much, just enough that the shove lost power. The glass rattled but held. That tiny survival of order unnerved the room more than violence would have. The laughter that tried to start died in people's throats. Seagal tilted his head. "Feel that?" he asked the biker, almost softly. "The shake in your hands?" "What I feel," the biker growled, "is I'm about to end this." Thunder rolled outside, distant but deep, vibrating the glassware. Neon flickered, steadied. The mirror behind the bar showed a reflection of the crowd that looked braver than the real one. For the first time, doubt etched itself into the bearded man's stance. His shoulders dropped half an inch, his jaw worked, his eyes cutting between Chuck's calm and Seagal's silence. Then suddenly, he lifted his hands from the table. Palms open, empty. The crowd exhaled all at once, relief and disappointment twisted together. Chuck lowered his shoulders slightly. Seagal's face didn't change, and then the biker's right hand snapped down to his belt. The motion was fast, practiced. A flash of metal caught the light. The room had wanted a story it could laugh about in the morning. What it got instead was one that would scar every witness into silence. When Seagal entered, the quiet was unnatural, as if someone had pressed a hand over the bar's mouth. The bikers tried to laugh louder, to reclaim the sound, but the strain was obvious. Their voices cracked on the way out, and the crowd heard it. Seagal didn't acknowledge them. His pace was steady, weight balanced, every step landing with certainty. He cut through the room like someone walking a familiar hallway. Chuck hadn't moved. He sat with that same faint curve at his lips, eyes calm as though the storm was finally shifting off him. The bikers, once so sure of their dominance, looked jittery in comparison, gesturing too big, laughing too hard, boots scraping where they should have glided. The short biker raised his voice. "So that's the trick, huh? Old man's got Hollywood bodyguards now?" He spread his arms, inviting laughter that came out thinner than he wanted. Seagal stopped by Chuck's table. Without looking at the biker, he picked up a half-empty glass, held it for a moment, then set it back with precision. His voice, low but sharp enough to cut, carried, "There are things you don't play with." The words dropped like ice water. The bar stiffened. Conversations that had been murmuring died mid-syllable. Even the jukebox's neon glow seemed to dim. The biker's smirks faltered. The bearded one stepped closer, forcing bravado into his posture. "Like what?" "Momentum," Seagal said. The crowd shifted uneasily. No one understood the line completely, but they felt it. The room wasn't a playground anymore. The bearded man reached out, hand open, aiming to shove Seagal the way he'd tested Chuck. He never got that far. Seagal's hand rose, calm as if answering a door. He caught the wrist, turned it just enough, and with a light press guided the biker backward. The man fell into a chair as if it had been waiting for him. No slam, no fight, just gravity redirected. Gasps broke around the bar. A woman near the jukebox covered her mouth. A pool cue tapped to the floor, forgotten. Chuck's eyes softened. Not surprised, not impressed, simply acknowledging. He didn't move, but the corner of his mouth hinted at quiet agreement. The biker shot back up too quickly, rubbing his wrist. His pride burned redder than his skin. He rolled his shoulders, pretending nothing had happened. Seagal had already turned away, which only deepened the wound. Being ignored stung worse than the grip. The short one tried again, shouting toward the crowd, "Cheap trick!" That's all. His words fell flat. No one echoed him. People had seen enough to know better. Seagal leaned slightly on the table. "Game's simple," he said. "Don't touch people to check if they're real." Nobody laughed. The rule hit harder than any punch could. It exposed the bikers' whole routine. They thrived on testing limits with contact, shoves, spills, burns of cigarettes. Now even that seemed childish. The bearded man clenched his jaw. His boots dragged as he advanced again, unwilling to let silence declare him beaten. He reached out once more, angling for Seagal's chest. The hand barely traveled before Seagal intercepted it, rolled it down, and placed it against the wood of the table. Knuckles struck with a dull thud. The biker grimaced before he could hide it. The room inhaled as one. The bartender muttered, "Jesus," under his breath. Chuck finally shifted forward slightly, pushing the glass to the table's center so it wouldn't tip. The movement was small but deliberate, as if tidying the scene for what came next. The short biker, restless, jabbed a finger toward Chuck. "You just gonna sit there smiling while your guard dogs work?" Chuck lifted his eyes. He didn't answer the insult. He looked past the man, at the reflection of the crowd in the back mirror. Faces lit by shame, by doubt, by a recognition they didn't want. The silence around his gaze was answer enough. The bearded man's voice cracked, half threat, half plea. "You think you can walk in here and own this place?" Seagal finally replied, "We think you can walk out." Thunder grumbled outside, rattling glassware on shelves. The bar's neon sign flickered once, then steadied. The storm was arriving, and the room felt it. The biker didn't move toward the door. His pride held him still. His fingers flexed like they were arguing with each other. The short one hissed beside him, desperate. "Make them respect you." Respect. The word circled the room like a thrown knife. Nobody wanted to catch it. The bearded man's hand hovered near his belt. The crowd leaned forward instinctively, sensing the shift. Chuck angled his body, calm but attentive. Seagal's eyes didn't blink. What came next was still unwritten, but everyone knew the night had passed the point of jokes. The bikers weren't in control anymore, and that knowledge scared them more than fists ever could. The bar had become unstable, like a room tilting just enough for glasses to slide. Voices clashed. "Hit him!" From one side, "Leave it!" From another. The crowd couldn't choose. Arena or sanctuary. People half stood, half sat, waiting for someone else to commit first. Chuck and Seagal stayed still, side by side, yet different in presence. And Chuck sat loose, almost smiling, like a man who knew storms could be endured without meeting them head-on. Seagal was sharper, elbows set, chin dropped, movements efficient, built to show control without waste. Between them, the bikers looked noisy and disorganized, like actors who had forgotten their lines. The short biker tried to restore the script. "Street rules," he shouted, pounding his chest. "No stunt doubles." He shadow-boxed toward the jukebox, arms flailing. Nobody cheered. His routine looked childish now, a carnival act in a funeral parlor. The bearded one, wrist still sore from Seagal's grip, burned for recovery. Twice humiliated, he needed to stamp his authority back on the floor. He stepped close, feinted at Seagal's shoulder, then pulled back before contact. His hand trembled. He turned on Chuck instead, hoping the older man would be easier prey. The crowd groaned. Some begged, "Don't," while others egged him on. The air thickened, hot with sweat, beer, and the metallic edge of fear. Chuck finally spoke, calm but audible everywhere. "True strength isn't breaking," he said. "It's knowing when to stop." The words were simple, but they landed like weight. People froze, replaying their own nights of escalation, arguments, mistakes, mornings of regret. Even Seagal glanced sideways as if acknowledging something worth hearing. The bearded man barked a laugh, hollow. "Stopping is quitting." But no one echoed him. Seagal's eyes stayed on the biker's hands. "Listen to him," he said softly. "This will cost more than you can pay." The tension frayed. The short biker panicked at the quiet and tried to fuel it. "Finish it," he yelled, grabbing a bottle and smacking it on the table. The sound cracked across the room. The bearded one snatched it. With a sharp flick, he shattered the glass on the edge. Shards exploded, beer spraying over the table and onto Chuck's hands. The smell of cheap malt rose bitter and sour. The bar shrank into a circle. People pressed back against walls, creating a ring no one had agreed to, but everyone obeyed. In the center, the biker with the jagged bottle, Chuck with calm eyes, Seagal unreadable as stone. Normally that sound, glass breaking, would start a full bar fight, but not here. The crowd knew this wasn't theirs anymore. They watched like witnesses, not participants. The bearded man held the broken bottle low, blade angled, body steady. This wasn't a bluff. The short one grinned nervously, circling the edge. "Now we see who's real," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Thunder rumbled outside, shaking the glassware. Rain tapped the roof in uneven rhythm. Inside, no one moved. Seagal lowered his chin, hands loose, ready. Chuck wiped beer from his fingers onto his jeans, eyes fixed on the man with the weapon. He took a small step forward, not aggressive, not challenging, just to close the gap where a mistake could hurt someone else. "Stopping," Chuck repeated, voice even. That's strength. The crowd held still, caught between fear and awe. Even the short biker lost his grin. The bearded man's knuckles whitened on the bottle. His pride demanded a move. His eyes darted, door, window, faces, but always came back to the two men in front of him. He raised the bottle slightly, shoulder twitching. The room inhaled. The bartender's hand hovered under the counter, frozen near the phone. Seagal's fingers lifted a fraction, invisible to most. Chuck's gaze stayed steady, almost gentle, unblinking. A leak in the roof dripped onto the floor, each plink as loud as a drumbeat. The short biker hissed one last time, "Make them respect you." Respect. The words spun around the room and landed heavy on the man holding glass. He tightened his stance. The jagged mouth of the bottle lifted higher. The crowd shifted back, ring widening. The storm outside boomed. Inside, three men stood at the center of something no one else dared to touch. And everyone knew the next second would decide what kind of story this night became. Rain tightened its grip on the roof until the bar sounded like a drumhead being played by careful fingers. The circle widened a notch as boots shuffled back, leaving a lane that felt ceremonial. Time thinned. People counted their own breaths because the clock had stopped serving them. The bearded man adjusted his footing, the bottle's jagged crown catching neon and sending thin slivers of light across his knuckles. He wasn't posing. He was deciding. No chance now. The crowd had burned through its words. They stood shoulder to shoulder, the room's heat rising into a fog that dulled the mirror behind the bottles. The bartender's towel hung from his hands like a flag he'd forgotten to wave. A woman near the jukebox mouthed a prayer without sound. Two ranch hands braced their palms on their thighs, the posture of men who expect impact and don't yet know where to turn their faces. Chuck broke the stillness by stepping forward exactly one pace. Not a fighter's glide, a human approach. His shoulders were low, his palms empty and visible. He met the biker's stare with something that wasn't challenge and wasn't pity. It looked like recognition, the kind you reserve for a younger version of yourself who still believes a single reckless act can bend a whole night into a story you can stand behind. The bearded man's elbow tucked close, the blade tilting to a workable angle. Sweat slicked the webbing between his fingers. The short biker breathed through his mouth, eyes wide and bright, feeding on the nearness of consequence. "Do it," he whispered. Not to his friend, not to the room, but to momentum itself, as if it were a living thing that could be convinced. Chuck didn't speak. He let his nearness earn him a second of attention. When it arrived, he used it like a precision tool. "Look at me," he said, barely above the rain. "You don't want this to be the sentence they finish for you." The words landed in the small space between them, the only place left that felt private. A muscle jumped in the biker's jaw. For an instant, he seemed to see what came after. Police lights washing the walls, paperwork, a friend's useless hand on his shoulder, a story that wouldn't sound brave when retold in daylight. The bottle sagged half an inch. Then pride corrected it. The arm rose back to level. The room swayed on its feet, a living pendulum. Someone near the door muttered, "Jesus," and didn't know whether he meant a vow or a curse. The neon sign buzzed, flickered, steadied. Seagal moved at last, not a step so much as a decision made visible. He came up beside Chuck's left shoulder and placed his hand there. Flat, warm, deliberate, no grab, a touch like a break. The gesture read in a dozen ways at once. Hold, wait, I've got it. Heads tipped, hungry for a scene they could mythologize. Two names in one frame, a duel inside the duet. The bar's pulse climbed for the wrong reason. Chuck's eyes slid to Seagal's hand and then to his face. A flash of amusement crossed him, not at the man, but at the idea of escalation dressed as help. He turned the smallest degree, enough for the neon to catch the lines by his eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried without effort, not loud, but unavoidable. "The question isn't who's stronger," he said. "The question is, who's wiser?" The sentence didn't strike like a slogan. It arrived like weather, cool air through a door that had been shut too long. Even Seagal let the line sit. His hand stayed where it was. The crowd absorbed it in ripples. A man squeezing his wedding ring, a woman lowering her phone she hadn't remembered raising, a kid in a ball cap lifting his chin like he'd been told a secret too big to repeat. The biker blinked, as if grit had found his eye. Wisdom is a poor currency when your credit is with rage. He looked past the words for a way out that would let him keep the night. None appeared. His breath shortened. The bottle wobbled by a fraction that only the closest three noticed. The short one, panicking at philosophy, tried to flood the room with volume. "They're playing you?" "He's playing you," he yelped, the pitch thin. No one joined him. Chuck didn't move. Seagal didn't move. The stillness became pressure. Outside, thunder rolled low and long, a freight train shifting tracks in the dark. Inside, the faucet in the corner started its slow, impatient drip, each drop tallying seconds that had begun to feel expensive. "Last chance," Seagal said softly, the words more inventory than threat. "Be smarter than the story you want." The bearded man's mouth flattened. In the mirror, his face looked older by 10 winters. He tightened his grip until tendons drew cables across the back of his hand. The bottle lifted, decisive now, not quivering, and found its line, a mean diagonal meant to end debate. The circle compressed. Boots squeaked on damp floor. A stool leg knocked softly against the bar and then stopped, its owner freezing mid-apology. Then, another turn, unexpected and simple. Chuck eased his shoulder a half-inch back, enough to slide out from under Seagal's palm. The touch broke. The crowd read it 3 ways in the same breath: a refusal to be saved, a permission granted, a transfer of duty that might be mercy or hubris. Seagal's hand fell, but his weight leaned, a coil settling lower, no longer a sign, but a readiness. The biker moved. The lunge wasn't wild. It was the clean slash of a man who swung at things that didn't swing back. His lead foot bit into sticky beer and held. His hips drove. The jagged mouth rose into the small, deadly corridor between chest and throat. In that slice of time, sound stopped. The rain, the fan, the breath, gone. The room's entire attention narrowed to the triangle of glass, hand, and the 2 men who had chosen not to stand behind anything but their own decisions. A drop from the leaking roof let go at last, fell through the heat like a weightless coin, and broke noiselessly on the floor. Chuck's face did not change. Seagal's eyes sharpened, as if the world had come into focus. The biker's arm reached its moment of no return. Somewhere behind the bar, the ice machine kicked on with a hollow thump that felt, absurdly, like a gunshot. No one turned. A chair creaked under a man who had forgotten he was sitting. The bartender's thumb finally found the phone and hovered over the 9, unpressed. Every instinct in the room wanted to blink, and none of them could. At the edge of the ring, the short biker lifted onto his toes to see better. Hunger and dread chewing the same nerve. A woman squeezed her partner's wrist so hard he would inspect the bruise tomorrow without telling her. A ranch hand whispered, "Don't," to the past, as if he could speak retroactively to all his own mistakes through this one man's choice. The bottle's edge flashed once, a white tooth in neon. Seagal's weight adjusted by a hair. Chuck drew breath, and the point, glass, intent, pride, entered the space where outcomes live. Everything that happened next would explain these men to themselves. It would tell the room what kind of town it had become. It would name the price of wisdom and test whether strength could afford it. The biker drove forward. The world held still to watch.